the task that has been given to me is to share the research work that we have done and how that research has helped us to change the practices to treat the nephrotic children. So what I'll do is I'll just share salient features of nephrotic syndrome that we have done some research on, how to diagnose it and the dilemmas in it, the classification of nephrotic syndrome that can be based on age, the steroid response or morphologic changes, the familial variety of nephrotic syndrome, the biomarkers that can predict the outcome of nephrotic syndrome, complications like hypothyroidism or AKI, and the way forward. So I have only 20 minutes. Each of these talks can be of 20 minutes, but I'll rush through and I'll just give you salient features of these researches, how it has helped us to change our practices. So if you go through the 2021 KDIGO guidelines to diagnose nephrotic syndrome, the most important thing is that it's the defect of filtration barrier that leads to heavy proteinuria, which is called nephrotic range proteinuria. And they have given 3 different diagnostic tests, a 24-hour urine protein, a ratio, or a dipstick. And all these 3 have different values. So you need heavy proteinuria that leads to low serum albumin in your blood. You may or may not have edema and high hypercholesterolemia. Most of our patients would be diagnosed easily on clinical parameters. But when it comes to these cutoff values, you sometimes get stuck, whether they have nephrotic range proteinuria or not, right? And most of other things, albumin and cholesterol are not readily present at your hand, so you cannot diagnose. So what we did, we assessed same children with clinical parameters of nephrotic syndrome and did all 3 tests on them and compared them, and to see, to our surprise, that it's the sensitivity and the specificity of these tests are very low. Okay, so what we concluded is that you have to rely on your clinical parameters more so on rather than those absolute cutoff values. And by the time we'll complete our systematic review of these diagnostic tests, we'll be able to tell you more that which test has more reliability. Secondly, to classify nephrotic syndrome, you can either base them on their age, they're very young, congenital, the infantile, adolescent, and the congenital ones are the ones that are born with some filtration, some defect in their proteins of that filtration barrier. So what we did were we analyzed these 2 most common genes, the NPHS1 and 2 that code for nephrin and podocin, that are seen in 80% of congenital nephrotic syndrome children in the Caucasian population. But when we saw it in our population, it was reverse. Only 20% of congenital nephrotics had NPHS1 mutation. So it was something, our genes are different, or the structural defect that we get in congenital nephrotics is different. That needs more. This was in 2012. Okay, so we did this more. I'll tell you more about this. The adolescent ones, those children, those teenagers who present with nephrotic syndrome at a later age, they don't behave clinically as younger children, neither they behave like adults. They are a different entity clinically and morphologically. So we compared them with young children, and as you can see, there's clearly difference in the variety of nephrotic syndrome they have, and that also tells us that the treatment protocol of these adolescents will be different. Based on steroid response, we all know these 4 varieties, the steroid sensitive ones, dependent, resistant, and the frequent relapsers. So with steroid sensitive children, we see quite a few children, and we see that some of them would respond to a very low dose of steroid, and after a few days they will stop taking it, and they would still stay in remission and would not relapse. And there are others who have very high requirement to develop all kinds of toxicities and even resistance. So we wanted to predict what takes, is it something, is there something that we can predict these children that they have, they will behave differently? So almost 80% of our children are steroid sensitive, but the others who are in problem are usually the ones who start at a younger age. Less than 4 years of age would require more medicine, and they are more prone to develop complications and relapses. Similarly, these children with nephrotic syndrome, whenever they develop a viral infection, an upper respiratory tract infection, they get a relapse. And what we did was we took 100 patients in a year, we gave all of them a flu vaccine and compared them with our historic cohort a year prior. And what we found was that these children, when given a flu vaccine annually, would have not only a less number of URIs from influenza, but also from other viruses, hence less number of URIs and lesser number of relapses. Okay, the steroid dependent ones, we all know that historically they've been treated with cyclophosphamide, and there is a lot of skeptical, the clinicians are very scared about cyclophosphamide with its long-term side effects and even the immediate side effects of bone marrow depression. So we went retrospectively and analyzed all our children who were treated with cyclophosphamide, and we found out that it was the number of side effects, serious side effects, was almost negligible. And they all did very well, and they had, in the medium term, in a year, 2 years, they had sustained remission. It's not included in this paper, but we have children who have achieved sustained remission for more than 8 years. So we do give them cyclophosphamide in that controlled dose, and we have very good experience with it. Similarly, those who continue to relapse, the steroid-dependent ones, they get a biopsy and they then get treatment with calcineurin inhibitors, which is the cyclosporin and tacrolimus. So we collected all these different group of children, and we analyzed their results. And as you can see, that almost 50% of these steroid-dependent ones who were treated with calcineurin inhibitors did very well with cyclosporin. And we were able to stop it after 2 years. So that is another practice point for us. The primary steroid-resistant one are the ones who are at risk of developing renal failure the most. Okay, so this was an earlier paper in which we had identified all the different spectrum of morphological lesions that were seen in our patients, in our cohort. And all these different ones, we have studied them separately. So the FSGS1 can be steroid dependent or resistant, and their outcomes are, depending on how their steroid response is, their age is. Cyclosporin, in most of them, in more than half of them, has been able to give them sustained remission. Similarly, this entity is not seen very commonly in the West. So when we reported this, that we are seeing a lot of children who have diffuse mesangial proliferation and diffuse deposits of IgM in their mesangium. So we thought that this is a distinct entity, but our editors in the West, since they were not seeing this disease, they refused to accept it as a different entity. So we collected all these patients, and this is the world's largest series of IgM that we have reported. And then we compared this with our children with MCD, and to find out that there were more patients, more likely chances of them going into renal failure, and they were more steroid resistant. They also had a higher probability of having hematuria on presentation. So IgM, membranous, again, mostly seen in adolescents, but the adolescents that we saw, again, were different from their clinical parameters, and all these features are different from adults. So we were, again, not sure that, how to treat them. So what we did was we devised our departmental protocol for membranous and tailored it for the needs of children by the criteria of their proteinuria, and stratified. The previous cohort that we had studied was not stratified based on these risk factors. So according to our departmental protocol now, we now stratify them and treat them according to the established protocols, and soon we'll be able to share the results of this. This is another entity that is again seen only in our population most commonly, and we do not find any paper, any such case reported from the West. A mesangiocapillary GN, especially of children who would present with a rapidly proliferative glomerulonephritis, renal failure requiring dialysis, and when we biopsy them, they have acute inflammation in their glomeruli with crescents and a mesangiocapillary pattern. And when we give them cyclophosphamide, they get cured. Free of dialysis, 0.5 creatinine, good, no specific therapy required. So we collected all these 50, 60 such patients and we reported these two. Now, there are a small group of children who we had recognized earlier, but we were not able to classify them according to international literature. Children who were steroid sensitive before, but developed steroid resistance later on. And we used to call them late non-responders or different terminologies. But finally, in recent guidelines, they were classified as secondary SRNS. And we now collected all these secondary SRNS children and studied their clinical profile and their outcomes. And luckily, we found that these children do much better as compared to the primary SRNS when they are treated with calcineurin inhibitors. They have better results. The frequent relapsers, now it's a famous drug, levamisole. A lot of people have variable experience with it, so we wanted to try in our population also. We have not published our data yet, but the manuscript is all ready. Clearly, when we gave it for 2 years, you can see that before levamisole, the steroid dose, the cumulative dose, and the number of relapses that these children had were more as compared to after they had taken this course of levamisole for 2 years. Now, all these histopathological lesions that we see in nephrotic syndrome on biopsies, although it's a 15-year-old paper, but it's again one of our most cited paper because it is one of the largest series of nephrotic children with all different varieties, and it gives a true picture of the spectrum of morphologic lesions in our population. Now the familial one. You see, the problem with the prior paper, we had checked only in 2012 NPHS 1 and 2. Now we got the commercial kit to evaluate for the WT1 and LAM1, 2, so 5, 6 more genes. And again, we saw that in our population, the same genes that are much more prevalent in the Caucasian population is not seen here. And this is something that whenever we talk to our friends from the West, they know that our genes are different. We need so much more work in this. You know, we need our own gene pools, libraries here. We have to define our genetic makeup. We need more NGS studies, and then we need protein modeling to see exactly if these genes that these mutations that we see are disease causing or not. But because of multiple problems, resources, expertise, technical availabilities of genetic analysis, we thought that those children who have steroid-resistant nephrotic syndrome, there are papers who have reported that they have some kind of structural defect, right? So there has to be some genetic involvement. So what about those siblings who are otherwise asymptomatic? Do they have proteinuria also? Did they get that share of genes from the same parents? And when we screened them, luckily, there were some 60 odd families, and there were only 5 such siblings who had asymptomatic proteinuria. So even though we have more than 80% consanguinity and all these steroid-resistant nephrotic syndrome in these families, but probably it's not only the genes that are causing this. There were reports that beta-2 microglobulin is raised in children with steroid-resistant nephrotic syndrome. So we wanted to study this, and we could not find a significant role of beta-2 microglobulin. Only if it's like very high, you can the negative predictive value is significant. Otherwise, beta-2 microglobulin was not there. However, we are still working on HLA-B antigen and DR antigen. There are specific genetic makeup that would predict a good response to cyclophosphamide in steroid-dependent patients. So we may be able to now tell with the test before giving them cyclophosphamide whether they would benefit from it or not. Now, a little bit about hypothyroidism. In congenital nephrotics, we always give them thyroxine, right? Because we know that with this heavy proteinuria, they would have deficiency in thyroglobulin. What about steroid-resistant nephrotic syndrome? So we screened these children with hypothyroidism, with steroid resistance for hypothyroidism, and we found that only those steroid-resistant patients who have persistent heavy proteinuria, low serum albumin, even after 3 months, may be at risk for developing some significant hypothyroidism, so they should be screened. Everybody does not need that screening. And the AKI. It is one of the biggest risk factors for developing chronic kidney disease in nephrotic children. And we found out that the risk factors for this AKI in nephrotics is mostly drug-related, drug toxicities, and also infections in our population. And these 4 risk factors for chronic kidney disease are steroid resistance, cyclosporin use, FSGS, and drug toxicity. We're now working on this systemic review and meta-analysis, which is almost ready, and we have seen these risk factors that are significant with all worldwide literature. So we have also worked on these consensus guidelines throughout the country, and we have published it, endorsed by everyone, agreed by everyone, not so well practiced, but like Salim said, it takes time for people to accept, right? But hopefully this needs to be updated also, and we are going to work on that too. So what is my conclusion with all this? I think we were taught in our first year that the epidemiology stands for the 3 Ds, dynamics, determinants, and distribution. The epidemiology of nephrotic syndrome in our population is unique, it's different. So we cannot rely on imported protocols and guidelines. We have done our share. We have done the retrospective single center studies, okay? Now we need to join hands. We need interventional studies. We have to prepare our next generation for this challenge. We have to train them, prepare them, and give them, you know, in academics, I think that it's a 4 by 400 meter race. I'm almost at the end of my lap. I have to pass this baton. And for that, this is our team. Irshad is here, Asiya, Pawan, Habib, thank you. I'm ready to pass my baton to them. These are some 20 odd nephrologists, pediatric nephrologists all over the country who are trained, and I'm sure they'll train more. Thank you very much for your time.